It's the new year, and Hat Talks with Arch is back with episode 8. I wish all listeners a year with good health, favorable winds, and birdies on the course while remaining relevant always, as I promise to continue to provoke your mind and stir your thoughts over the next 12 months. The last 7 episodes touched many chords in different ways. Some considered switching from battery to analog wristwear. Many began looking anew at writing right, and more recently, several decided to revive or learn a language to stay relevant and do things differently. Thank you for your feedback. In the new year, it is also time for me to acknowledge the catalysts in the family who encouraged and pushed me to begin sharing both my thoughts and experiences and were primarily responsible for the startup podcast Hat Talks with Arch. Amy Walker, a master coach at 21accents.com, an actor, screenwriter, voiceover artist, and many more things. She is my daughter-in-law. Nipun, my son who studied media, was a professional musician and co-founding a production company, Soulfire Creations, with his wife Amy, is now a commercial pilot. Anita Nair, also a daughter-in-law who journeyed from Bollywood to being one of the top-rated hairstylists in Hong Kong and is soon to be a qualified counselor. Akhil, the senior son and 3PL professional who came up with the name of my podcast, Hat Talks with Arch. And finally, my 12-year-old granddaughter Alia, who recently decided to help train Achacha to upload a video on Spotify by giving me a 6-point instruction note. Today's episode is titled The Travelbassador and is about what travel was about in those days and to wonder what it means today. 50 years ago, at a young, impressionable age on the training ship, we were constantly reminded by our training officers that in the profession that we were embarking upon, when traveling overseas, we would be the ambassadors of the country, and our behavior and manners would reflect on our countrymen. We were thus needed to behave right while spreading goodwill and knowledge about our country. Thus, the term coined travelbassadors, short for traveling ambassadors. Now, a question. Why does one travel these days, either domestically or internationally, especially when it's not for work? Is it because we have spare money? Because there is easy credit and EMIs? Is it just to tick the boxes of places visited and sights seen? Is it because everyone's doing it, so we need to keep up to be current? Or is it to experience, learn, feel, and embrace the wonderment of discovery while sharing the story of India and its people? In the 70s and 80s, we only had interlanguage dictionaries and such for translation, so we communicated with gestures, actions, mimicking, and got the message across. It was like dumb charade with lots of guessing and accomplishment at comprehension. Our travels and varied exposure quickly taught us to mimic accents on auto mode to be better understood, whether speaking to the Arabs, East Germans, or the Americans speaking their English with accents that differ from New York to Texas and from Louisiana to California. It was an education to observe the Italians communicating with gestures wherein a safe arm's distance was maintained for safety, or decoding the matter-of-fact romantic French and their facial expressions, or expression facialis. I, for one, loved the sound and manner of the Singaporean English with the la attached, and the gentle Japanese manner of speaking softly while bowing, and the Espanol spoken in Latin America. As travel ambassadors, it was an education in culture and local practices. For instance, it was heartening to discover that the Americans were a very trusting people and better mannered than I had given them credit. Agents visiting the ship always dressed smartly in well-fitted jeans, tucked-in shirt, a belt, boots, and a hat that was tipped to a lady. And they were always very polite while addressing one as sir or ma'am, and not the present-day bro. I noted in Japan, Korea, and most of Southeast Asia, people left their shoes outside their home and temples like we do in many parts of India, and so we learnt to respect the practice. Our early travels as cadets had our senior officers involving themselves in our non-professional education by taking us out to experience gastronomy, la comida regional, and places of varied interest without allowing us to share the costs. And so I educated my palate with the best steaks in Buenos Aires, the greatest tiramisu, which I sampled in Trieste, the paella in Valencia, the bouillabaisse in Marseille, the Cypriot barbecue, and the bulgogi in Korea. We didn't eat only at restaurants. Sometimes we watched what the locals were indulging and sampled that, like the frite baguette in France, hot French fries sandwiched in a baguette and doused with mustard, relish, or ketchup. Quite delightful, really. Or the New York hot dogs, or the English fish and chips wrapped in a newspaper. As a traveler, while I also visited the Louvre, Rijksmuseum, and others without the crowds, the Eiffel Tower, Tokyo Tower, Sears, and many other towers, the Copacabana beach, where I discovered the most beautiful range of complexions the human body could host, and also discovered by accident that the Cypriot never locked his home or car, as there was no crime on the island. My palate was further refined with stimulants like cheese and wine that I dared to try, and must credit my early education to Captain Julian Young, the first English master I sailed with, a marquis professional mariner who manufactured a wonderful cheese board around which my personal education of cheese began 3 times a week at the senior officer's table, which also had a Geordie or Welshman chief engineer and a second engineer who was my countryman. Dinner would be with wine brought in by turn by one of the four, followed by the offering of a cheese board post dinner with at least 2 or 3 different types of cheese. I encountered the hard Stilton with its sharp taste, the cheddar, the delightful camembert and brie soft cheeses, and my palate would look forward to the next day's cheese board. The discovery of Goudas, the Danish blue, and Gorgonzola were enlightening. And while these were great, I didn't much care for the Swiss or Emmental and some others. At our wine and cheese table, my palate was surprised when administered wines were not sugary sweet and surprisingly complemented different food and cheese in a nice way. These discoveries of old world wines was a revelation. Whether it was a Riesling, a Muscadet, a Chardonnay, or a Zinfandel, a Shiraz, or a complicated Cabernet Sauvignon, there were interesting expressions which loaded the developing palate and brain with lots of data as we got accustomed to and fond of tannins and acidity. In Venezuela, I also discovered how to serve sambuca, the liqueur that needed 3 beans of coffee dropped into the glass and set alight to allow the coffee flavor to decoct within. I love both the flavor and the spectacle. As travel ambassadors, while we saw the sights, interacted with local people, had open minds to offer our senses new opportunities to explore, we also made friends, many of whom are still connected more than 40 years later. I met Lloyd Tan in Singapore when I was 20 years old and earning 200 rupees per month. We made friends over Coke and some flight lice and remained friends for many years. While searching for a bank in Maracaibo, Venezuela, Mrs. Burgo and her daughter helped us despite the language barrier and later invited us to lunch. We communicated through gestures, formed a friendship. On a subsequent trip, we met Mr. Burgo, a criminal lawyer who also studied in Patna and kept in touch with the family by mail for years. In 1981 in Fremantle, we were heading into town when we caught a ride with Steve and Jeanette Brady and their baby. We planned to see a movie, but they cheerfully told us, "Wish you luck, mates." Apparently, there were no cinemas where we were going. Instead, they invited us to join their mates for some beers at their home. Steve, a fisherman, gave me a well-preserved dried shark's jaw as a keepsake. The visit was wonderfully spontaneous and we stayed in touch with the Bradys as pen pals for years afterwards. Graciela and her friends were college students in Buenos Aires when a few of us on shore leave met them in 1980 or 81. They were trying their English and we our Spanish, and we hung around together exploring the city eating the local food, and enjoying the company over the 10 days we were there. We are still in touch. Unlike today, when reports suggest travelers are loud, rude, demanding, and obnoxious, we, on the other hand, were serious about being the goodwill ambassadors of our country, friendly, curious, and exchanging cultures while on voyages of discovery. And had I not traveled and had an open mind, I would never have had the joy of the experiences shared earlier. So, as we get into 2026, let's look forward to the revival of the travel ambassador of yore. Till the next episode, and while you remember to like, share, and subscribe, this is Captain John signing off.